Charlie, first of all, I have to just commend you on this because obviously it dropped today, so I was able to catch some of it this morning before coming
Oh,
here.
great.
You were unreal in this role, unsettling, which is a testament to your craft, so congrats.
Oh, thank you, I appreciate it.
Of course, but I want to kind of get into this because I feel like Ed Gein is someone who not a lot of people are familiar with. But is it true that his crimes actually inspired some of our famous horror movie villains?
Yeah, I mean, he's had an enormous, he's maybe the person who's like one of the biggest cultural impacts without anybody really knowing who he is, or very few people. So yeah, I mean, he really existed. He's a true historical figure who did a bunch of terrible things. But yeah, he went on to inspire directly. The book that was written about him is the basis for Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, and then Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs. But I think what's really interesting to look back in the sort of progression and evolution of cinema is just what a departure Psycho was. That really pushed the threshold of what was allowed in censorship, but also radically transformed the way people perceived human beings in film. That monsters had never really been portrayed as humans. They were like Dracula and vampire and stuff. And that Psycho was really the first time that the monster became us.
I just feel like I'm a puzzle, and none of the pieces fit.
You said Psycho is a departure. I also feel like the telling of his story here is a departure from what we've seen. It kind of touches on all of these movies as well. Explain what we kind of get within this series.
Well, one of the really important questions that we're asking here is like, who is the monster, or are there multiple monsters? And the consequence of exposure to graphic media images. So one of the things that we learned through our research is that there was the world was flooded with these horrendous images that came out of the Second World War, which were, sort of very, very difficult for a lot of people to absorb and to sort of reconcile. And in an effort to do that, to explore those things, to be able to understand it, all of these very violent graphic novels started to come out depicting, like the atrocities of Nazi Germany and stuff. And Ed became exposed to this. We know this. He was sort of obsessed with reading these books. And that's where, and in an effort to normalize it, he started reenacting some of the things he saw. And then Hitchcock takes his life and makes this movie about him, and then we ask the question, was the consequence of that? Are we darkening the collective American psyche by letting that film out? And then are we perpetuating the cycle by making this story? And are you perpetuating the cycle by being an audience member watching this? And we sort of really ask that whole question in, I think, a pretty poignant way.
Eddie, you're a mess. Only a mother could love you.
When I look back upon my life, it's always with a sense of shame.
And I know that a lot of actors say that in order to take on a character, you kind of have to find empathy, find love for the character that you're playing. How are you able to kind of approach taking on this role when it's someone who's so disturbed and grotesque?
Yeah, I was really terrified of it. I found myself in a really black pit of despair when I was doing all of the research, because there's not a lot of very human texts about Ed. There's very much like these sort of celebrations of the grotesque, a lot of the books that have been written about him. I just wanted to, I certainly didn't feel like I needed to love him, but I did feel like I really needed to understand him and have no judgment, and just to understand really what was happening, and then try to find something that felt like a concrete truth that I could find an emotional way into feeling, and then operate from that place. And so I really tasked myself to read everything you could possibly read about him and get this fully realized perception of who I thought he was.
Yeah, and to that point, obviously you mentioned he died in the 80s. his crimes took place in the 50s. There's, I imagine, not a plethora of resources there. So how did you approach the research process, the preparation process?
What was incredibly helpful is that he spent the last 30 years of his life in a mental institution, in a hospital for the criminally insane. And he did these quarterly reviews. And so all of those medical records I was able to get my hands on. And they were just like a bounty of incredible information that chronicled both his perception and his experience of his mental illness, but then the medical profession's perception of what was going on with him. And between those two things lay the sweet spot where I thought I got to sense like this is actually who this guy was and this is how his brain worked. And he was really sick.
Yeah, is it true that you lost 30 pounds to take on this role?
Yeah, I didn't realize, as sometimes we don't in life. I hadn't been in front of the camera for a while, and I put on some weight, and I got to the costume fitting for the first time about 3 weeks out, and sort of just expected myself to look like Ed when I put the costume on, and I went, oh, this is all wrong. And so, yeah, I had to rapidly, I think I lost 28 pounds, but I had to do it in 3 weeks because I'd left it too late. So yeah, that was a tough 3 weeks. A lot of sauna, a lot of cardio, and very little food.
You're not from Plainfield, are you?
Eddie, leave the girls alone.
Don't mean nothing by it. Just wanted to welcome her to town is all.
Wow, and the voice, you nailed. Creepy, creepy voice there.
Thank you. There's a lot of people talking about like the creepiness of that. That wasn't my intention with the voice. My intention was that to reflect what I thought was like the emotional truth of Ed, which was that the only person he had in his life with his mother in reality. And I mean, we have this Adeline character in the show, which is a composite of a few other different characters, but really the only person he deeply had like a long-standing relationship with his mom, and he adored her. And all he wanted for the 70 years he lived, all he wanted was the love and acceptance from his mom. But she told him every day she hated him because he wasn't born a girl. So that voice was born of me trying to understand what psychological and emotional impact that would have had on him, and how that would have manifested, and how he might have created a way of being that would reflect what he thought his mom wanted him to be, so that maybe she would love him. Just sort of like tragic, but it certainly wasn't that I was like trying to like make him creepy. It just, that was sort of a consequence of him taking on a voice that wasn't his own, which like creates this thing that feels like sort of fractured, and that you don't feel like you're watching like a real person, because I don't really think that his experience was grounded and integrated in the way most people are. I think he was sort of this like disparate collection of things that didn't quite mesh.